Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time on Wednesday night at Madison Square Garden against Emmanuel Quickley and R.J. Barrett and the Toronto Raptors. Yes, for the first time in 3 matchups this year, we'll see both former Knicks on the court against the Knicks. It should be interesting to this homecoming week, whether it be RJ and IQ coming back to MSG for this game or Isaiah Hartenstein coming back on Friday. It's a week of reunions for the New York Knicks. Hopefully it includes some victories over the portion, as the Knicks are hoping to avoid a 4-game losing streak going into this game tonight. If you're looking for the status of Karl Anthony Towns and Deuce McBride going into this game, I don't have it. They haven't announced it yet. I'm assuming I know they're both questionable, but we'll see this game time decision against the 8-28 Toronto Raptors, which can't take it for granted after the Knicks just lost to a very shorthanded Orlando Magic team. Look, I'm coming in here hoping to give you all a reprieve from the Tibbs minutes discussions. And if you're online, first of all, don't be. We're going to take a break. It's very cold in New York at the moment, so I'm hoping you can take a break from that and come in and get some perspective here with me. And what better way to get perspective about how the Knicks are doing and maybe even just how cold it is in New York than going north of the border to talk to Blake Murphy, who covers the Toronto Raptors, also hosts the Raptors show for the Fan 590 on Sportsnet up in Canada. Blake, welcome to the Knicks Film School Podcast, sir.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the nice introduction. And yeah, I know it's cold there. I'm thawing out. I just ran home from the studio I'm still thawing out a little bit. I think you can see the pink in my face a little. Yeah. It's I don't know. What is it? I don't know. The equivalent of 10-ish Fahrenheit here before all the wind and everything. I'm sure people care about what the weather is like here. It's as frigid as the Toronto Raptors offense is the best way to put it.
Well done. Professional segue you did right there, leading me right into what's up with the Raptors on the court. Look, we're here for perspective here. A 3-game losing streak is never as bad during a regular season, especially when you're 24-13, as the Knicks are. However, 8-28 does sound bad, and yet this is going to be my third Raptors pregame pod where it doesn't seem like the vibes are all that bad in Toronto, that this is a learning year and information gathering season. You know, I know that they just got Quick back, and I'm excited to see him on the court tonight. I would not be excited if he lights the Knicks up tonight, but I mean, you tell me that from your perception of the Raptors fan base, now that Quickley's back and, you know, they're going to see this trio of him and Barnes and Barrett on the court together. What is the expectation going forward? Does it matter whether wins potentially come, or is it just a performance-based evaluation now?
Well, the wins definitely don't matter. Last night, I shouldn't care that much that the Charlotte Hornets come away with a win, but I do because, the reverse standings. It's an interesting season where everything has that in the back of your head. But so you mentioned this is the third time that you've done a Raptors pregame, and it is really interesting, vibe and tone wise, how things have changed from those earlier 2 matchups, where the first time these 2 teams matched up, the Raptors had just won 5 out of 8 games. They'd lost 2 in a row heading into that, but it was Oklahoma City and Dallas, right? It's okay, no one expects the Raptors to hang with Shea, to hang with Luka, but they had just won a bunch of games. And even when they'd lost games prior to that, it was a lot of oh, Jason Tatum has to travel on a game winner to beat them. Oh, they play the Nuggets to the final possession. They play the Bucks okay. They things like that. A lot of losses that in a rebuilding season you're happy with. So that's the first time that the Knicks caught the Raptors, and the game played out that way. The Knicks won by 5, but it was a pretty good game. RJ definitely wanted it down the stretch. Quickley was the most animated I've seen Quickley off the bench, because he obviously wanted that win and wanted it for RJ as well. And then the second time these 2 teams met was during that same losing streak for the Raptors. But at that point, it was okay, they'd lost to a couple bad teams in a row. You're okay with the losses still. Oh, you played the Rockets tight. You had played the Knicks tight. That stuff's fine. But that Knicks game was the start of arguably the worst 4-game stretch in franchise history, where the Knicks beat them by 14, and it was close until it wasn't. OG had that career night against them, but the next game, the Raptors allowed a franchise record 155 points against the Grizzlies. The game after that, they almost set a franchise record with 31 turnovers in a game. And then the next game, they did set a franchise record by losing by 54 to the Celtics. So you go through, and then they beat the Nets, but they've lost two pretty bad ones in a row now. They lost to that same shorthanded Magic team, and then they just got blown out by a Bucks team that had just lost to Brooklyn and Portland. So you go through 3 meetings in the span of a month, Raptors Knicks, and it's been 3 very different points for the Raptors. Hey, we're competitive. We're okay with not winning. We've won some games and it's fun. Hey, we're still hanging in there, but this is getting to be a little bit much losing. And now you're catching them at, they've lost 13 of 14. And the contrast between where things were earlier in the year when it's like, yeah, the wins don't matter that much, but you got to play competitive basketball. You got to be setting the right, cultural tone and stuff like that. That stuff is now feels a little bit more tense. So, getting quickly back is great. Getting RJ back is great. This is only the second time that the starting 5 will play together in over a calendar year that trade was December 30th of last year. This is only going to be the second time that they've started together and only the third time they've played together in any game. So that kind of hangs over everything, but big picture, and I know this isn't exactly answering your Emmanuel Quickley question. Sorry, but
no, you're good. You're good.
It's you asked about the pulse of the fan base. It's changed quickly, where everyone still knows, it's a rebuilding season. You're more focused on the long-term development and stuff like that. But the way in which they've been losing has really changed over the course of these 3 Knicks meetings.
So the last time the Knicks had a season like this was the year that actually led to them drafting RJ Barrett, the 2018-19 season, where you go into it, Kristaps Porzingis is hurt because he tore his ACL the year before, and it was very clear early on. They got off to some kind of dreadful start, 5-25 or something, and it appeared as if this is where it was going, and maybe we'll see Porzingis back on the court. And then they traded him to Dallas midway through the season, only intensifying their efforts to get to the top of what was then known as the Zion lottery sweepstakes. By how things have changed since then. What's interesting about what the Raptors went into this season with, there's very clearly, I think there's very clearly a prize at the top of this draft, although it does seem like it's much more flattened at the top for the draft prospects. And to what you just said, this starting 5, they have a lot of their core pieces already there. There really is no comp. And where the Knicks were getting blown out and games were done at halftime that season, this Raptors team, it seems like now that Quickly's back, to your point, the next month or so, until, maybe really the next 3 weeks until some trades start to get made, that let's see what we have in the starting 5. So I ask, in your opinion, what do you think you have in the starting 5?
Yeah, and they got to figure it out, because you're right. The standings wise and the vibe wise, maybe it's similar to the 2018-2019 Knicks, who I think finished dead last and just got some
worst
bad
record in the league.
Fortune,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, dropped to 3. Yeah.
I'd still take 3. We'd be all right with 3.
Right.
I would love.
Ended up with RJ, so yeah.
But no, the thing that's different about this Raptors one is they traded OG for Quickly and RJ, who are still young. Quickly just turned 25. RJ's only 24. Scotty's only 23. But Quickly just got the big deal. RJ's already on his second contract and paid pretty well. Scotty signed the max extension that'll kick in next year. If you're talking about how long this rebuild could be, I think you really do need to see something from this starting group and your core pieces pretty quickly, because again, you don't want to win too many games this year. I'm not saying they got to go 500 the rest of the way and play their way from the number 3 pick to the number 10 pick. You don't really want that, but you need some evidence that these guys can play together, that there is a chemistry there between Emmanuel Quickley and Scotty Barnes, that RJ can shift from, the role he's been playing over these last couple weeks with them so thinned out to the role they'll need him to play when everyone's healthy. That Grady can slot in there, and your starting 5 isn't just too porous defensively with Dick and Barrett and Quickley as your 3 perimeter defenders. So you don't want to win too many games, but you do need to see that these pieces fit together and are decent enough together, because you're already paying a lot of your core as if you're ready to take that next step. And I think, the most interesting thing for me at the trade deadline is going to be, so far, all we've heard is they're not really listening on Jakob Poeltl. And I think why that is, well, he's 29 years old and he's got 2 more pretty affordable years left. this team, I think, thinks they can be competitive again next year. Not title competitive, but like, hey, definitely in the play-in and maybe even fight for that 5-6 seed, kind of competitive. And if that's your plan, then maybe you don't want to move Jakob Poeltl. But if that's your plan, you better see these guys play together, and they, you know, they don't have to look they don't have to look good together today. They certainly didn't in the last game, but they got to look like they can play together, and like you're not one piece away, but you got to see what the vision is of like, okay, you get a Cooper Flagg, a Dylan Harper, whoever, you know, pick your guy, and you drop it in there, and then you see the path to being a 5 or 6 seed in the Eastern Conference. So the fact that all those guys are on their second deals or already have signed their next extension really does, I think, kind of ramp up how quickly you want to see these pieces fit together and show some chemistry, because they haven't, like, this starting five has played, what is it, 19 minutes together now or something like that, or 18 minutes together now ever. And like, it's been over a year. It's tough. And then you get into some of the like individual combos, like Emmanuel Quickley and Scotty Barnes. The first game Quickley was back. Actually, they played the Nets, and the Nets are obviously very, very bad and not trying to win and not good defensively. But that was the only time in the games that they played together that Quickley and Barnes looked like they had a chemistry together. Like the 1-4 pick and roll made sense. You ran some inverted stuff. Quickly spacing was helpful. Scotty was more in the power forward spot instead of this giant point guard. But really, like, those two haven't looked that great together. RJ's going to have to be the one who probably changes and sacrifices his role the most from where he's been. I don't know. You need to see a lot over the last like 2/3 of this season, because I don't think they, salary cap structure wise and like contract wise, they don't have a crazy long runway to figure it out. And like appetite for a rebuild wise, I don't think the front office or the fan base wants to do like a Charlotte, Detroit, Utah style never ending rebuild. I think they want to be good again soon.
So just an interesting juxtaposition. You said the Raptors starting five has played 19 minutes together. Just contrasted with the Knicks current situation, they are averaging 19 minutes a game together on the court, which again, we are banning all Knicks minutes talk on the pod here, Knicks fans. I promise you.
It is, though. That's a really interesting point where, like, you know, the Knicks at the start of the season didn't quite have the chemistry down, and like they have it down. They seem to have it down really well offensively now, but it seems like they're still figuring some defensive things out. And that starting lineup is 5 really established individual guys with a really established coach who 19 minutes a game for half a season are still figuring some stuff out. So like, obviously the runway here for like, it takes some time for even like Dame and Giannis are still figuring out the 2-man pick and roll there. And
right.
Those are like 2 of the best, like maybe the 2 best guys you could put in a 1-4 situation other than like Steph and LeBron. Like, it's this stuff takes time, and it really is a stark contrast of like, A, what the two teams have gone through, and B, how long this stuff does take to, you know, to figure out and iron out.
I believe it was Windhorse that did some reporting from the Knicks camp that, look, I'll take the bait because I see what the chat is yelling about. The minutes have gotten to a point of contention with the Knicks and Knicks fans, I should say. And apparently from the Knicks camp, the thought was that they made 2 significant trades this offseason, one 2 days before media day and before training camp, and playing this starting 5 as much as possible builds it almost rushes the chemistry even more, so that a team that doesn't practice a ton gets the chance to build their chemistry on the court as by playing on the court as often as possible. So I recognize that, you know, the Knicks are doing their best to, like you said, work out the kinks throughout this regular season, like this being their practice time, by playing them as much as possible. Which, look, to just turn it back on the Raptors, I'm very curious because, like you said, that 2019 version of the Knicks that was losing a ton and lost 65 games and like getting blown out very early, like there was nobody that mattered to the, and I don't mean that like the players don't matter, but like in the sense of like to what the solution was to that team eventually. You know, that was a team built to lose as many games as possible. Maybe Kevin Knox was going to pop, and he ended up, you know, being on a different team on his next contract. And it's like just Mitchell Robinson emerged from that version of the Knicks to be part of the team when they were ready to be good again. So the Raptors already having 4 in-house, it seems, with Grady Dick and Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett. It's the weirdest rebuild I think I've ever seen, that these are 4 guys I think will be on the team when they're ready to be good again. and they are what their record is at the moment. To just further that point, because I haven't gotten your take on RJ yet, because you mentioned now with everybody back him transitioning to a different role. I mean, you tell me, like, do you foresee him adjusting well to that different role again? Especially when he was playing so well in the role he was assuming when Scotty and IQ were out.
By the way, before I answer the RJ thing, I just want
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
say I feel for you and I feel for the Knicks fans with the minutes talk, because this was the 2021-2022 Raptors. Like, they won 48 games that year. And like at that point, I was doing so many like stat head queries to figure out the last time a team had played this many guys, this many minutes, et cetera, et cetera. And like the only other things that would come up would be like, yeah, the Tibbs Wolves sniffed it.
The whole thing.
And then it was like that year, Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam both averaged 38 minutes a game. OG and Scotty both averaged 36, and Gary Trent averaged 35. And like that Raptors team needed it because they weren't going to win 48 games playing, guys further down. Like Thad Young was their seventh man that year. And I like Thad Young, but like that doesn't say Kem Birch was their backup center. It doesn't say a lot of great things about your depth there. So anyway, I feel for you having to answer the questions, and I feel for the fan base having to worry about it constantly. As for the RJ thing, it's really interesting. He's and he's an interesting figure here generally because he's so well liked as a Canadian, as a local guy, as a guy who's put on for the national team. He's been popular since he got here, and he had such a great start to the season offensively. Like, he's averaging still like 24, 7, and 6. That's and I could see. I don't think it would be that hard to a couple years ago have squinted and been like, yeah, RJ could average 24 points a game and he could shoot 46, 34, 75 from the, field goal, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage. Like, RJ's always had enough of a scoring package and an ability, even though he's not a super efficient finisher, he gets to the rim enough and gets to the free throw line enough that I think you could be like, especially on a bad team, yeah, RJ could average 23 or 24. The thing that I didn't really think maybe not in a single season jump anyway, the 6 assists per game is
the passing.
My impression of RJ coming in, and like Quickly would even joke about this sometimes in training camp, that like, oh yeah, RJ's a really good cutter, but only if he's going to score. He's not going to cut he's not going to pass off a cut. Like, obviously RJ was not like a ball hog or anything like that. He averaged 3.5 assists consistently, but for him to make the jump to 6, and when Quickly was out for an extended period, the Raptors run him basically as co-point guard with Scotty Barnes. He shows this great pick and roll chemistry with Jakob Poeltl, more pocket passing, a better knack for the dump offs than maybe I expected. And that was good. Now you look big picture, RJ's like, okay, he's been roughly league average scoring efficiency wise. So you can, I think you're okay with RJ's scoring usage coming down a little bit. It also, the Raptors have they've been forced to play bench lineups that don't have Scotty or RJ at times. And like, even the idea of like RJ just getting to like run a bench unit and cook is like, Darko's got to be so happy that he has guys now. He has enough guys now that a starter can prop up a bench unit. Anyway, this is to say, I think RJ's scoring usage can come down, and that's fine. And his, efficiency should go up a little bit. More of that, hey, instead of running everything through you, you're on the second side and you get to attack a closeout or attack a seam or something like that. We're going to run Barnes quickly over here, swing it to you, and then you've got an advantage to attack. That's worked pretty well for him when everyone's healthy. I think we'll see more of that. But where I mean, he's going to have to adjust and maybe he's going to have to sacrifice is he has shown a lot of growth as a passer, as a guy who can, maybe he's not going to, spoon feed guys at the rim or anything like that, but he's certainly grown as a passer. And I think that's where he's going to have a little less opportunity. Now, we've already seen in these first couple games, there's an adjustment period. Emmanuel Quickly tends to play at a little bit of a different pace than the starters were playing without him. They're like slowing it down a little bit more between the beats kind of thing. And RJ hasn't had the ball in his hands quite as much with the opportunity to create for others. And that's where this adjustment's going to come in. I still think he's going to get plenty of touches to get his 20 points a game. But is he still, getting the opportunities to get 5, 6, 7 assists in game? Are they still, having him initiate as much offense? Those are the areas that I think, RJ might be the guy who has to sacrifice a few possessions here, because you're certainly not going to want to take them from Scotty Barnes.
It's interesting you're saying that the pace slows down with Quickly, because they used to Like he and RJ
I
used to
know.
just get out and run in the second unit when they were with the Knicks.
And the Raptors have been like a weirdly really bad transition team this year, even though they're young and fast. Like Scotty's a good transition player. Ochai's a really good transition player. I knew RJ and Quickly as good transition players, but they just like haven't figured it out offensively in transition at all. Like I think they rank in the bottom 10 in points per possession in transition, and they're only like average at getting out and running. So it just and maybe Quickly will help with that. But like I more meant in the half court, he's a little bit more like, hey, I'm gonna run a pick and roll, I'm gonna snake it back, I'm gonna keep a guy on my hip, I'm gonna take an extra dribble or two to look for the dump off. At least early on, that's what it's looked like. Whereas, you know, RJ, everything is like, I'm gonna punch toward the rim, punch toward the rim, punch toward the rim, and even if it's like my arm's way out here, I'm gonna get that shot off. So it's just been a little bit different. The Raptors also like without Quickly, and this isn't necessarily a Quickly versus RJ thing. This is they didn't have a lot of offensive personnel stuff. They just ran a ton of delay stuff where like, hey, first action, not there, swing it to the big at the elbow, dribble handoff, swing it. It just like they ran a lot of that stuff where like the pace at least feels high because they didn't have someone like Quickly who can survey the floor and be like, that's the opening I'm going to create. They had to kind of let the offense create the offense.
So I'm actually going to transition here to some questions from people watching live, because the next question I have was asked by someone watching live. So shout out to JRose712. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does Toronto miss OG Anunoby and Precious Achiuwa? I'm assuming they would be different scales for both. And for those watching live, you see under Blake's name, he has "I miss OG" in the captions under his headline. So you tell me, how much do Toronto fans miss OG? And I will add the name because it was asked, Precious Achiuwa.
Yeah, Precious a little bit less, certainly. Like I think everyone liked Precious as a dude. But you know, you have
I've grown a very strong soft spot for Precious Achiuwa because he's a Mets fan. Like we bonded over Josh Hart saying that Soto was going to the Yankees, and then the result happening that happened, you know.
Nice. So have you talked to him about Soto?
So I haven't, because like I'm just saying, like in general online, in spirit, me and Precious Achiuwa we're best friends for life. You know?
I had Ray Alston, Skip to My Lou, was on our show a couple weeks ago, and he's a huge Knicks fan. And I just like, obviously as a Jays person, like I have a Jays show in the summer too. I wanted Juan Soto to the Blue Jays.
Well, yeah,
it's not like I can be like, oh yeah, you like the Yankees are in a much better position than the Blue Jays right now. But to get the twisted in a little bit on Ray Alston about Soto going to the Mets was fun.
He's out of your division, which is the good thing, you know.
But no, Precious was really well liked as a dude. Like but I think sometimes you have a young player for 2.5 years. If the development is a little slower, he doesn't get quite to the level that maybe you had hoped. There can be some frustration at times with the ups and downs. I don't know. I think Precious is a really good. Like I think if he's in your 8-man rotation, that's more than fine. But I think it's OG. You know, OG has such a unique personality too. And, you know, him and I we're not like friends, like media and players don't become friends, but like we had a good relationship. Like when he was back last time, we caught up a little bit, talked about Indiana football. You know, I would talk music with him and stuff like that. So miss it in that regard. Love the bit he's doing with the microphone. It's such an OG thing. And then really like on the court, I think everyone in Toronto always appreciated OG Anunoby's defense, and Raptors fans would sometimes get into the, you know, little bit of the inferiority thing when OG wouldn't get love for all defense or defensive player of the year or whatever. And a lot of that was like, he played 43 and 48 games, you know, over his 2 best defensive seasons. So some of that was availability. Some of it was, we can vote 4 Boston Celtics onto all defense, but we can't vote multiple Raptors. We could I should have cleared this. Knicks fans and Raptors fans are like, okay, picking at the Celtics together, right?
100%. If you want to just throw a stray shot at Philly too, we're all here for it.
Yeah. How's it going, Nick Nurse?
Even more so. There you go.
No, so like I think people here had a good appreciation of OG Anunoby's defense, and everyone is happy to see him playing well in New York and getting really, really recognized for that defense. But I think there's always a layer of, with any fan base and any player that's really good at one particular thing, the absence of that skill makes you really realize how good that skill was. And to go from like OG Anunoby as your wing stopper for years to like I like Ochai Agbaji. I think he's a solid defender. He is not OG Anunoby as a lockdown guy. RJ Barrett is probably the guy who would draw that assignment in the starting lineup right now. Like Scotty Barnes is their best defender, and they used him on Giannis the other day, but like they don't want to put him on Jalen Brunson the way the Raptors before probably would have put OG on Jalen Brunson. When you don't have that guy, and then it's like you have weaker perimeter defenders, or you only have, say you ran into a team with multiple guys that you like if the Raptors had OG and Scotty still, you could put them on Jalen and Cat and switch some of that and do some fun stuff. OG would guard Jokic or Embiid at times. Like, you take that guy away, and even if you really like Scotty Barnes defensively or like Ochai Agbaji, like, man, you don't have OG Anunoby. It really is felt in like every game. I'm sure you do this too. Before every game, I try to figure out, okay, who's going to start on who? What's the first defensive look going to be? And it used to be so much fun because it was like I could make a case for OG being on this guy or that guy or this guy. And like when they had OG and Scotty and Pascal, who are all pretty versatile positionally, you could really do some fun stuff with that. And now it's just like, I don't know, Scotty gets the best guy who's 1 through 4, and then you just cross your fingers everywhere else. The drop off with defense from OG to just about anyone is just crazy.
Yeah, in the playoffs is when we really got to see that last year, when they had him on Maxey to start out the series, and then by game 4 he was guarding Embiid. You literally had the two best players on the Sixers, and these two guys averaging close to 30 a game in that series. And OG Anunoby was tasked with guarding both of them at certain points. And I don't know if you feel this, or if you, like, from what you've seen from what he's done in New York, I actually think off ball is his best trait. Like, him roaming as a free safety and him digging on drives, it almost seems like it results in a turnover every time. Which is why
pick 6 is like OG's specialty.
I
call it that anyway.
No, that's like, what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you're wide open, your turnovers to turn into wide open layups. Yeah. The funny thing about how this season has gone for the Knicks, where it's starting off with them getting used to each other, they've really settled in with these two wings, Mikal and OG, where Mikal is your point of attack to start games. If he's doing well, then it stays that way. But then, like Christmas Day against Wemby, the fourth quarter adjustment was, it was partially forced because Cat got into foul trouble. But Tibbs was like, I'm going to put Precious in the game, have him guard the 4, and OG, you're guarding Wemby. And the most success the Knicks had that day against a literal alien invasion on Christmas Day was when OG was guarding Victor Wembanyama. So I would miss him if he wasn't on my team too, while recognizing the direction of both franchises has gone a certain way.
And you get into an interesting question eventually with the Raptors, where like OG's 27, so he's certainly not old, but like I mentioned, Scotty's 23, RJ's 24, Quickly's 25. So you made that trade and you got younger, and you turned one potential building block into 2. Those things are all important, but you're also paying Quickly and RJ together like $55 million. So if you were hesitant about the OG deal, and obviously OG got paid very, very well and is going to make like 40 plus over the next little bit. It's I don't know. It does, given that OG's not like a 30-year-old vet, he's like a 27-year-old vet. It does, I think, put the pressure on, like, yeah, man, Quickly needs to become what we and I wanted Quickly as a target. Like I wrote before the trade, it's like, hey, here are the couple guys that I would try to target if you sell Pascal or OG, and he was one of them. So I have high expectations for him, but OG's going to be this for like a long time still, I think.
Yeah, we're hopeful. Believe me, we're hopeful.
Yeah. And he's been healthy this year, which is the first time. Like he's an interesting one because he's always had the big minutes load, and I don't think that is a concern with him. But he's had like nothing but freak injuries. Like it's never like OG has a hamstring strain. It's always like OG went bowling and got his fingers caught in the ball, or like that didn't actually happen. But it's always weird stuff like that, like an eye injury, a concussion, an appendix bursting. Like it's never just a injury that would make you give a guy like an injury prone label. So it's been very nice to see him play every game.
I knocked on all the wood in my office when he said that, just Yes, he's played every game so far this year. We're hoping that continues. The next question comes from Ben Kim Garvey. Does Toronto love Emmanuel Quickley the way we did and do? It's kind of I'll add an additional addendum to that because I know you saw I had Michael Grange on the last time the Knicks played the Raptors, and he had just done a really good profile of RJ Barrett. And like the RJ extension conversation in Toronto really intrigues me because it's just there's such an added element to not just him playing or extending. It's like in Toronto for the Raptors is such an important part of that. So while we loved it, like, there were Knicks fans that loved RJ and had turned on RJ by the time he had left. Unanimous praise for Emmanuel Quickley by the time he left. So I'm curious what that dynamic is like where Quickley, I mean, he in the pecking order popularity wise, it seems from my perspective, he's absolutely behind RJ, even though the expectations might be way above what RJ could potentially be.
Yeah, I think there are two factors working against Emmanuel Quickley early on. And one is that he got the payday. So that comes with, you don't, it's obviously different when he's on a rookie contract and Knicks fans can think on what he could become. And even if he has bad stretches, well, he's on a rookie contract. He's coming off the bench. The leverage isn't as high, right? And then here he's gotten paid now. So that comes with more expectations. But the other one and the bigger one is like, he just hasn't played very much. Like, he's only played 6 games this year. Got hurt in the opener, came back, got hurt again. He tore his UCL. How do you get the Tommy John injury coming around a screen against the Lakers, just like getting caught on an arm? So he's had some bad luck in that regard. And most of his games last year too were like after the Raptors pulled the plug. So even if you liked what you saw, and I don't want to speak for all fans because Raptors are among the more diehard fans that I think they stay locked in the bad times as good as any franchise out there. But I would forgive people if during Quickley's main run with the Raptors last year, some people were like, I'm not going to watch every single game. I'm not going to be as dialed in. They're trying to lose games. Quickley also missed a chunk of the season late in the year because of the death in his family.
Yeah.
So I think Raptors fans just haven't seen him enough, and more to the point, haven't seen him enough with Scottie and RJ and the other pieces. Again, he's played 6 games this year and these guys haven't played together. So I don't think there are any, people like the skip. People, he was a very fun guy to have on the bench while he was out, one of the better, up there coaching guys and celebrating and stuff like that. But, he's played 44 games total, more than 2/3 of those in a, we're just playing out the string of a bad season environment. I just think Raptors fans haven't gotten to know him on court and get as invested in him on court yet. I think, the rest of the way here is the opportunity for him to do that. Have some signature moments, get that 3-point percentage up. Let's see, what we were expecting when he came over from New York. And he was good after the trade last year. It's just we just really haven't seen a ton of him yet.
With that unfamiliarity with Quickley, was there any pushback from Raptors fans to the money that he got this summer?
Yeah, and I think it's not necessarily about Emmanuel Quickley himself so much as you're starting a rebuild and paying a guy 5 years at $32 million a year. And it also, the initial number got reported higher than it actually was because of unlikely incentives and stuff like that. But I also think this is an NBA wide thing. Cause again, I think the Raptors fan base is on is pretty smart and up to date with this stuff. Is 32 million is I don't know. I think Emmanuel Quickley is the 18th highest paid point guard in the league this year. 32 million sounds like a lot of money, but the way the cap has gone, 32 million is number 2.5 on a standard roster of a good team. It's not. So I think we're all still adjusting to the fact that $32 million isn't actually crazy money anymore. So I think that's part of it too. But yeah, I mean, he got a 5-year deal at $32.5 million a year, and we basically haven't seen him since then. So I think that's tough. I think the only way to, round out of that is he's going to play some games here, and fans will get to know him a little bit more on the court.
So last question from the chat. We're going to go to Don't Bother Me, I'm Busy. Hi, Busy. Do Raptors fans really think they won the trade? I'm going to take out the word really because I have no idea if Raptors fans think they won the trade. And I guess this is more of a temperature check of how both fan bases feel about the trade, almost a calendar year since it happened. So you tell me, how do Raptors fans feel a year later after the trade?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for everyone. I think the general sentiment that I've gotten is this is really a win-win. The Raptors needed to get extra pieces. They needed to get a little bit younger. They needed to move from one core to the next, and they were able to turn OG Anunoby, who everyone loves and is an unbelievable fit on the Knicks, into two guys who maybe fit the timeline a little bit better, and at least in Quickly's case, fit with the guy you're building around, Scotty Barnes, more naturally. So I think the hope here is that this could be a win-win. Generally speaking, I'm of the mind that if you get the best player in a trade, you're usually going to quote unquote win that trade. I think, relative to team context, OG Anunoby is the best player in the trade so far. But, I don't know. This could end up being a case of like both teams really do get what they need out of it. And I think, I think that was the case at the time. And I think it's the case. It's how I feel about it now. Obviously, again, we got to see how this Quickly thing works out. We got to see how it works with OG in the playoffs and if he stays healthy for you guys. But I really do think, it's not often trades end up win-win in the NBA, but I really do think this has the potential to just scratch both teams. Like, this is what both sides needed. It was a trade that suited both teams when they were able to make it in the middle of suing each other. So obviously it's a good basketball trade, right?
Surprised it wasn't part of the litigation. Like, you will turn over all documents and OG Anunoby,
Yeah. Is that how you guys feel generally too? That like you got the piece that suits the Knicks best, but can recognize that this suits the Raptors too?
Not only is that how we feel, or at least how I think most Knicks fans feel, but it's almost as if, and I've made this analogy before, so there's some Knicks fans that have already heard this, but like, the Knicks are obviously our favorite show, like the one we watch all the time. And Toronto's now this spin-off show with two characters that we loved a ton, and we're rooting for that show to succeed too. Like, there was a portion earlier this year where I wondered if RJ was in the All-Star conversation, and I would be fine if OG Anunoby never makes an All-Star team and RJ does. Like, technically Toronto got an All-Star out of it, maybe quickly makes an All-Star team one day, but the Knicks got the complimentary piece to Jalen Brunson, to what eventually became Karl-Anthony Towns, that could potentially launch them into contender status. So yeah, it really is a win-win for those of us in New York that value what OG Anunoby brought to what the team needed, and for those of us that have League Pass and want to tune into Toronto as often as we can.
By the way, are you aware of speaking of RJ All-Star, the like weird Raptors like fan base thing with RJ in the All-Star right now?
No.
Okay, so the Raptors have been promoting on their socials and at games and stuff like that, as you do, Scotty Barnes for All-Star. And there's a good chunk of the fan base that's like, what the hell? Why isn't RJ in this as well? Yep. Because like statistically, like RJ's averaging 23.5, 7 and 6. Scotty's averaging 20, 8 and 6.5. They like RJ's played 5 more games. Now RJ had the negative of being out with that illness right as All-Star voting started. And Scotty is obviously the face of the franchise and made the All-Star team last year and stuff like that. And the reality is, like, the team's 8 and 28. You're probably not going to get any All-Star, and you're definitely not going to get 2. But there is a pocket of the fan base that has, like, I get tweeted about it all the time. Like, why the hell aren't they promoting RJ when, the offensive stats only case is pretty similar. It's been like a little amusing, but also like, yeah, I don't know. It's been interesting to see play out.
But that from afar is the intriguing part about the RJ status.
Yeah.
Toronto,
and like Scotty's better than RJ. Like, yeah. Once you look at, the defensive side of the basketball counts too, you're like, oh yeah, Scotty Barnes is the best candidate to be an All-Star for the Raptors. Like, it's not super close who the team's best player is, but like stat line wise, and the fact that RJ's the hometown kid, people have found it like optically a little uncomfortable that only one guy's getting the promotional juice.
There was, I mean, look, I when it happened, the Carmelo Anthony trade way back when, I fell in love with it, and the Knicks promoted this like, oh, he's coming home, like he's from here, even though, man, the guy grew up in Baltimore. But like the fact that, like, oh, this is a homecoming of sorts added to the appeal of it. And a similar thing has happened with Karl-Anthony Towns, even though, again, grew up in New Jersey. Like,
but he's got the Dominican part of it.
Oh,
too,
he does.
Right?
every watch party we have, every Knicks fan's like, just wait until he has an entire summer at Dykeman, and you're going to see a different Karl Anthony Towns next season. Like, there is a cultural aspect to Cat coming to New York, and it's kind of shown in his personality. Like, there's this video going around of for New Era where he and Mikal Bridges are in the back of a cab in New York City, and they're answering typical New Yorker questions. And one of the questions was Mets or Yankees, and Mikal Bridges is a Phillies fan, so he had to answer a certain way. By the way, Mikal, love you. I'm glad you turned your season around. You can't spell Mikal without an L.
Yeah. You can't go in division though, right? If you're a Phillies fan.
I kind of have to, unfortunately, as a Mets fan. But regardless, the fact that they've really embraced their personality coming to New York, and the irony is, I say coming to New York, like Mikal didn't just go across the bridge from Brooklyn, but like going to the New York team that matters.
Towns is a Yankees guy though, right?
He is a gigantic Yankees fan, apparently. So like him coming to New York, it's really brought out his personality. And I liken that to, but just like it's on so much more of an extreme level, because like Team Canada All-Star in what RJ is to the Raptors. And, when the trade happened, like just talking to our friend Fred Katz, like RJ wasn't just a throw-in here. Like there is value to just him playing for his hometown team, for his hometown country. And I'm glad it's worked out for him so far.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned earlier, like your conversation with Grange, that the extension talk will get really interesting. What'll also get interesting is like if I don't want to do this because I would love for RJ to be a longtime Raptor, but if you were like one of those cold calculating front offices that is just like horny for net value or whatever, like if you were Tampa Bay raising it, you would look at this and be like, man, we really upped RJ from like toxic contract to a guy who's definitely worth the money and like has a little bit of control here. I don't think they're certainly not going to visit that this year, but like that's an intriguing part of the RJ dynamic too, is like, what if you get a really good offer for him and you're still like rebuilding and stuff? I don't know. It could get interesting down the line.
Look, Knicks fans fell in love with Dante DiVincenzo this offseason, and Leon Rose pulled the trigger and said, like, I have a chance to get better. And I think any rational fan is able to process, like even last year when the Quickly and RJ trade happened, any rational fan was able to look at that and say, I'm gonna miss these guys. We got better. Like as long as we get better, I'll live with any trade.
It does put a lot of pressure on. Like it better be the right trade though. Like it better work.
You got to make sure you get better.
Like it'd be one thing if the Raptors trade Kelly Olynyk for like a second round pick and salary filler at the deadline. That's one thing. Like everyone loves Kelly but knows the deal. You trade prime RJ before his next extension, you better win that trade. Like those picks better be unprotected. That prospect better hit. Similar to like Quickly better be the $32 million point guard if you're going to trade away OG Anunoby, right?
Yeah. Well, Blake, thank you so much for joining me. We really talk about the game tonight, part of it because I don't know who's playing for the Knicks tonight.
Also, because every one of my answers was like 12 minutes long.
Well, you also, like, in your answers were giving X's and O's examples to what the Knicks Knicks fans might see when they play against RJ and Quickly. And look, the reality of the situation is that there's not a gigantic sample size of the starting five for the Raptors. So as a result, we're all kind of waiting to see what will potentially get on the court from the starting five. And I'm looking forward to seeing both RJ and IQ on the court tonight. Hopefully, just in a losing effort, which from the way this conversation started, sounds like you'd be okay with that as well. With the
just get back to like being competitive and like being like, there's been too many post-game pressers lately where guys are using like, that was unacceptable. That's not us. That's disappointing. We can't do that in front of our home fans. Like, I just don't want another one of those. Like, let me have the first Knicks loss, not the second Knicks loss. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home know where they can find you, the Raptors show, and any other work that you do.
Yeah, so the Raptors show is up wherever you get podcasts. It's also on TV and radio in Canada, but I assume most of your audience is American. Matt Bonner is my co-host. So if you remember Matt Bonner from his 12 years in the NBA, lots of fun. Fred Katz was on today, actually, to talk a little Knicks, to talk a little Jimmy Butler stuff. So yeah, you can check that out wherever you get your podcast. And then I do a little bit of writing at Sportsnet, sportsnet.ca as well, but less of that now than I did before.
Do you want to plug during baseball season? You also have Jays Talk?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I have a Jays show in the summer, Jays Talk Plus, which, given how bad the Jays were last year, kind of just became MLB talk at times. It's really interesting. Like, obviously in basketball, like Raptors and Knicks have a relationship here, but like I feel like, say the Knicks were bad, you could start talking about Thunder Cavs tonight, right? I feel like most Knicks fans are basketball fans and would want to like interested in that. It's different in baseball where like Jays fans will like they'll have a little bit of time to hear about the Yankees or Red Sox, but like maybe the Dodgers, but like they don't want to hear about the Twins. They don't want to hear about the Astros. It's really interesting to be covering two bad teams in two sports where the fan bases operate really differently. It's interesting. Anyway, if you're a baseball fan, that happens in the summer as well.
Well, the dynamic is also look, for a Knicks show, like for Knicks Film School, the one season that the Knicks were somewhat mediocre, we just pivoted to like draft talk and transaction talk. But as far as like the New York market, I mean, if the moment the Jets were bad, it's all right, what are the Knicks doing this year? You know, the moment the Giants were out of it. Thankfully, the Mets and Yankees went as far as they did, but there were so many other things to pivot to. Which do you have time for one more question? I actually do have.
I don't have. I used to do some Leaf stuff, but I don't have that in me right now.
So, just from an ignorant New Yorker standpoint, and I'm actually coming from a hint of informed because I dated a Canadian in college, and I went up to visit her family.
Wow, you don't know her? She's Canadian. Wow, you actually did that in real life.
I'm just making sure that people know I'm coming from it at this not from the full place of ignorance, but I dated her. We went up to visit her family, and it was during the NCAA tournament. And like I'm coming from a world where that's the thing that happens in March, you know, like for 4 days, that's all that happens. And like I'm looking around for the channels, and I find the Toronto version of ESPN, or I guess the Ontario version of ESPN, and it's like here's 35 minutes on the hockey scores and Jay's spring training, and then like Sidney Crosby's latest injury update. And oh yeah, the Americans had a basketball tournament. Here are the scores. Like,
no,
I don't mean to go full extreme with it, but is that still the dynamic? Yeah.
No, I mean, this is like, look, that is something that we certainly grew up with. And even as far back as like 10 years ago, you know, like I used to be able to tell you, like, I don't know, when the Raptors were on the come up in like 2013, 2014, when they first kind of got good with the Kyle DeMar Messiah era, I used to be able to tell you, like, these are the 4 or 5 bars in town that I know will have the Raptors game on over hockey. Like, that's how rare it was 10, 12 years ago. It's more balanced now. Like, hockey's still going to lead. The Leafs are still going to lead, but the Raptors winning the championship, and combined with like Sportsnet, where I work, and TSN, the competing network, both have like multiple channels. So you get like, there's a lot of space to fill. I think it's definitely evened out over time. Like now there's not, you know, it's not, it was also, we had the benefit of like, there were a couple years there were like RJ, Shea, Jamal, like big college basketball names were Canadian. Zach Edey would have gotten some buzz last year. Like, I don't think we're going to have quite that this year. You know, even though there are some nice Canadian prospects, but I think last year too, like we were even doing some women's NCAA tournament stuff on the show. Like I think it's getting there. Like hockey's still going to rule, but March is also like a bit of a dead point for hockey where like everyone's kind of similar to basketball. People are like, okay, can we get the playoffs going now? Let's go. The NHL trade deadline happens like right before March Madness really picks up. So I think it's gotten better over time. It's certainly balanced out a little bit.
Yeah. The interesting thing that you just brought up about like the success the Raptors have had. The example I'm using is from winter break 2012. Okay. So much has happened with the Raptors. The Kyle and DeMar era happened. A championship happened. And look, the stark cultural shock for me was just like, again, America's national sport being football. I almost expect every segment on the talk shows is going to have, all right, Cowboys, what? Like, we need to talk about this for a second. And it was the reverse with it being like, all right, Canada, like hockey, what? And it seems to be it seems to have flattened out for a baseball / basketball follower like yourself. So
yeah, which is great. Like I grew up, like hockey was my whole life till I was like 16, and it was like, you're not good enough to make junior, man, give it up. So like I have a healthy appreciation for hockey, and I'm still like a hockey fan. But yeah, it's a way healthier and more balanced. Look, it's not perfect. Hockey's still going to lead. I'm sure a person who's only a basketball and baseball fan would still like a little bit more balance, but it's definitely improved over the last decade or so.
Well, one place where I hope it doesn't improve is that the Raptors do not improve their record tonight in a game against the Knicks, in which the Knicks kind of, just for morale, just need to not have a 4-game losing streak going into a game against their next stretch is OKC, Milwaukee over the weekend, and then this Pistons team that just continues to outperform expectations this year. So we'll see what happens. Blake, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. You heard all the plugs. Please check him out where all his work is done. And thank you to everybody that tuned in for this edition of the Knicks Full pregame pod. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching, please like this video. Remember to subscribe. A reminder, this Friday we will be at, if I can get the graphic up ready in time, and I can, T-Squared Social in Midtown, 7 East 42nd Street for the Knicks matchup against the Toronto Raptors, against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Be there at 6:30 for a pregame hangout. We will be there, obviously, for an hour ahead of time to hang out with you before the Knicks take on the Thunder. We'll also be there, I should say, on the 17th for the Knicks against the Timberwolves. Randall and DiVincenzo's first regular season trip to MSG. So that's your programming notes as far as watch parties are concerned. I will be back, not for the Thunder game. If you want an extended preview of the Thunder, I spoke with Andrew Schlecht a week ago. That pod is still relevant and has all the conversations about the Thunder, who still haven't lost since that game. Well, they have an interesting game against the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight. So we'll see what happens there. But I'll be back in the not too distant future with a preview of another Knicks matchup. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I'll speak with you soon. Peace.